Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. So this is, as promised, a second part to my last video. I've never done anything like this before, but that's usually because by the time I get to a story it's a few months old. This, on the other hand, is quite a rolling and involving situation that has played out over the last few weeks, and so this video is going to be the video that captures the new developments. Anyway, we can now move on to two sets of information that expand upon what I said last time before getting into my analysis of the financial statements once again, only this time I have a much better understanding of what's going on. So the first thing I need to mention is simply that Hulk Hogan won the trial in Florida. The day I published my last video, he was awarded $115 million in damages against Gawker boss Nick Denton, former editor AJ Delurio, as well as against the company itself. This has been compounded with another $25 million in punitive damages for a grand total of $140 million that Gawker has to pay if the ruling is upheld. So needless to say, Gawker are absolutely hinging on winning on appeal, otherwise it's goodbye Mr. Chips for the company, considering that they are worth under $100 million according to their own testimony. So the battle is very far from over there, only time will decide their fate. The second thing I need to mention though is newly unearthed information about Gawker UK branch's two executives, Rebecca Denton and Adrian Weinbrecht, as I discussed in the previous video. So first off, something simple I missed. They are in fact a couple, which makes Weinbrecht's involvement in the company and how everything is set up in his name make perfect sense. The second thing though is downright bizarre. Both of them have been falsely accused of being part of a satanic, cannibalistic cult operating out of Hempstead, London, which is where the business is located. In fact, I was planning on covering this very story back in 2015 and was planning on doing an entire expose on these insane fake cult allegations that seem to be popping up all over the place over the last few years, but I never got around to it. The gist of the story is basically this. In early 2015, a video surfaced on several social media platforms of two angelic-looking young children allegedly testifying to a range of frankly insane and very serious accusations of a satanic cult operating in the posh London neighbourhood of Hempstead. This cult was allegedly engaged in all sorts of dark and nefarious activities, mostly involving cannibalism, murder and mutilation of small children, as well as, and of course these conspiracies aren't complete without this, a massive ring of pedophiles numbering in possibly the hundreds. Among those accused were teachers, principals, members of the clergy, and a wide array of people normally considered pillars of the community such as business people, as well as of course Denton and Weinbrecht. So far, so Indiana. The actual story behind this cult though is actually a lot more sad. These two children in this video that started this entire conspiracy theory in fact belong to this woman, Ella Draper. And what this comes down to, as in just about all of these cases, a jealous woman determined to not let her ex-husband see her children. And so to this end, her ex-husband and father of the children, Ricky Dearman, was alleged to be at the center of the cult, leading the blood sacrifices to the great goat god and all of that stuff. And so the story, even though it was completely false, started to gain momentum because these kind of accusations attracted the usual suspects who believed the story of a 100-member pedophile satanic cult in their backyard wholesale despite zero evidence of any of it, and so the names, addresses and phone numbers of all of the accused cultists were and are still published online in an attempt to do justice unto them. This all led to mass hysteria, a police investigation and a court case brought by social services, which ultimately saw the children removed from their mother's care and the whole thing exposed as a hoax designed to punish her ex-husband. And to top it all off, she fled the country shortly afterwards. So now that we have that little diversion out of the way, we are ready to move forward. This brings me to where I was before at the end of the last video, looking at a set of financial statements and scratching my head. Now I have to absolutely in no uncertain terms preface with this. I am presenting my theory of what's going on here. I'm going to be using my training in financial analysis to basically speculate based on what is known. I'm not going to offer any allegations here. No allegations of fraud, no allegations of wrongdoing whatsoever. I'm simply going to extrapolate from what we already know. So a great many people have written in speculating about what the Gawker UK financials could possibly mean. Some see this as an elaborate tax dodge, and others see this as Gawker stashing assets overseas where the hoaxster's gonna have a hard time nabbing them. I, on the other hand, think that I've hit upon the answer. It is both and neither of those things. What I think is going on is a financing deal that protects some of Gawker's assets while at the same time freeing up cash in the business through a loan that is not on the books in the Cayman Islands company. So let's start with the basics, the profit and loss account. I re-crunched some of the numbers and it turns out that my suspicions were correct. The profit and loss account, which is actually at a substantial loss right now, is simply growing with the interest on the loan. What it's there for is basically to balance the books. You have the growing loan liability on one side and the fixed investment asset on the other, and so the difference between the two, which is the interest being put into the loss account, keeps things balanced. It's pretty simple stuff and there's nothing untoward going on there. The next thing is the timing of the loan notes. As I said in my last video, the loan notes were issued precisely at the same time that the new directors came on board. That in and of itself is very interesting. The question then is, what about the timing of the investment itself? If I were a betting man, then I personally would say that the investment would have occurred at the exact same time as the two new directors came on board, and that the loan was issued. Why this would be, I will explain in my theory that I'll get to shortly. And the third and final thing I want to get to before I get to my theory is the conditions of the credit. As I said last time, they are unusually favourable. To illustrate what I mean, let's go through the standard 5 C's of credit that any sensible lending institution or bank applies when lending to a company. So the first one is character. Well, Gawker UK is a shell company with no trading history, no credit history, and no way of generating income, so that's that one out. The second one is capital. Well, the company owns only one asset valued at the exact same amount as the loan, but the lender isn't able to get their hands on it for reasons I'll get to shortly. The third one is capacity, which they don't have any of since they're a non-trading company and they're not making any money. The fourth one is conditions, which is hard to apply here, but I think the $140 million lawsuit might count as being adverse conditions that might affect the value of the company's sole asset. And the final one is collateral. Well, interestingly enough, the loan isn't secured over anything, so this one is also moot too. The point I'm trying to make is that I doubt that this was an outside lender who lent the company the £7 million loan. To me, this loan has to be someone connected with the company, and I personally suspect that the Denton family trust might be involved in this, but I have no proof of this, and so I'm going to say this is just a theory. However, whoever these people are, we're just going to call them the lender going forward. Anyway, this brings me to my overall quote-unquote theory of what happened, and that's all this is, a conjecture on my part, and I encourage everyone to treat it as such. But I think that if I was Nick Denton, and if I was going to be sued for a large sum of money by a very angry wrestler, I might just be feeling the financial pressure, so perhaps I'd be looking for ways to free up cash in my business, and I might be looking to get some possibly Russian investors involved in my company. Now, one way of freeing up cash in the business is of course to sell off assets, but as my business is expanding, that's not going to be that practical, and so it's at this point that I have a brainwave. What if I sell part of the stock in my business to myself, and then I finance this purchase with a loan? So what I do is I create an offshore company in the part of the world where my sister happens to live and which has my family trust there. Next, I park over a quarter of my stock in the company there while setting her and her partner up as the directors of the company. Now I don't need to worry about my stock because it's managed by my own family trust, and so it might as well never have left my possession in the first place. However, what I do next is a masterstroke. In exchange for the stock, the shell company in the UK takes out a loan from some unknown lender. They then keep the loan accruing interest on their books and send all of the money from the loan over to my holding company in the Cayman Islands. Thus, I take all of the cash from the quote-unquote sale of the stock, but the stock isn't sold, it's safely in the trust's possession. Better yet, this influx of cash isn't marked in any way as a loan in my books. No. This is simply an influx of cash in exchange for the stock I just quote-unquote sold. That way my company has $14 million more cash, almost a quarter of the company's value, which makes me more attractive to investors, and all the liability is on the UK company, which is just a shell anyway. Best of all, this cash payment isn't on the books in the UK due to their financial reporting laws, meaning I don't have to give out a cash flow statement, so no one can prove that this transaction actually happened. And then in 15 years down the track, after I've hopefully won the lawsuit, when the loan becomes due, I just quote-unquote buy back the shares from the UK company with £10 million, which they used to pay off their loan, and everything is done. And then finally, to cover my tracks, I'll get one of the company's directors to rename the company to the name of his hometown in Australia, in the hopes that no dashingly handsome investigative reporter will ferret out the details. But hey, it's just a theory. I've been Dangerous Analysis. Thank you to all my patrons and subscribers, and as always,
good night and good luck.